I do think it's time for us to get started with this session. This is Learning for Leaders. A particular title today is Strategic Partnership Opportunity and Consumer Literacy. For those of us you have joined today, this is a more or less monthly webinar that the ECOP chair presents on various topics important to extension across the country. We, of course, will be transitioning next month as we transition chairs from Ed Jones at Virginia Tech University to Mark Lattimore at Fort Valley State University. Thanks for those who responded earlier on the survey. We decided that given the survey results of preferences for when this should occur, that we will continue to do this at the first Friday of the month at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Remind of everybody that number one, of course, keep your phones muted during this presentation. There'll be opportunities for engagement, and please feel free to use the chat box to enter any questions or comments that you have along the way. We're looking forward to this presentation today. The EDA team, which consists of Robin Shepard, Ali Mitchell, Ron Brown, Albert Essel, Lila Hoagland, Sandy Rubel, and me, had the opportunity to hear from Nate a few months ago to talk about this very interesting and exciting project that Farm Journal has undertaken called Trust in Food. And as was indicated in the title, this is a notion to figure out how to build a strategic partnership opportunity around consumer literacy with respect to food. So with that, Nate, I'll let you do your self-introduction, and I'll turn it over to you, and you and Mark will be able to manage the slides, and we will have questions later on. So welcome, Nate.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick. And thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm excited to share a little bit about what we're working on. And that really stems from my own personal experience and our work at Farm Journal, which I'll share in a little bit. But we really do value the work that Extension does. Just a little background on myself. My name is Nate Burtz. I've been with Farm Journal now for 7 years. Before that, I was working in consumer media for AOL and also for Gatehouse News Service. But I came to Farm Journal because, first of all, my family and I wanted to move to a rural area. So now we live in Northeast Missouri in a little town called Mexico. My wife and I have both served on our local extension council for a number of years, and are ourselves, between the two of us, 6-time graduates of a wonderful land-grant institution, the University of Missouri. My wife holds the PhD in our family, so you know where the intelligence and smarts lie. But my own passion for agriculture really began with my wife. And then as I began to learn more about the opportunities in agriculture and the way in which it impacts our nation and our world, I was really encouraged not only by that broad picture, but also by the role that institutions like land grants and cooperative extension can play at advancing agriculture and also advancing the bridges that exist between agriculture and the general public. So with that, Mark, would you mind advancing to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So as Rick mentioned, we're going to go through a brief presentation. I'm hopeful that in the next roughly 25 to 30 minutes, I'll be able to give you a picture of Farm Journal and of our Trust in Food initiative specifically, and share some examples of opportunities that we believe that cooperative extension can play and that we can be supportive of the work that you do across the country. And then at the end, as Rick mentioned, we'll try to leave plenty of time for Q&A, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, to learning about your own priorities, and to exploring opportunities together. As Rick mentioned, I had the opportunity to visit with him and Ali and others earlier this year. I first met Ali Mitchell and Doug Steele in Washington, D.C. back in March. Had the privilege of speaking with the EDA team at one of its bi-weekly Friday team meetings in April. And then we've continued the correspondence since then, and they have given me this opportunity to speak to all of you today. So with that, Mark, let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, and we'll dive into the presentation. So Farm Journal has been around for over 140 years. We were started by a Quaker farmer named Wilmer Atkinson back in the 1870s after the conclusion of the Civil War. And Wilmer recognized that farmers needed an independent advocate, someone who could give them the facts, someone who could help them run their farm businesses in a way that would be successful. He also recognized there was a lot of snake oil and bad advice and people who were trying to harm the farm community. And so he established Farm Journal as essentially a newsletter that was originally delivered via horseback and eventually grew to national scale. At one point, it was more of a lifestyle publication, but now Farm Journal has diversified significantly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we really are committed to agriculture. We're exclusively an agricultural organization. We are very committed to service journalism and to programs and initiatives that are designed to accelerate the good work that farmers and ranchers do, as well as the work that other influencers play, whether that's Cooperative Extension, whether that's ag retailers and CCAs, whether that's other conservationists and leaders who are helping farmers be successful in their businesses. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see some of the initiatives that we have started over the years. I would call out two of them in particular. One of them is the Farm Journal Foundation, which is a separate 501c3 that we founded roughly 7 years ago. And the Farm Journal Foundation really focuses on a variety of priorities, among them conservation, agriculture. They also focus on areas of global food security, training farmers to educate policymakers and other leaders in the role of agriculture in feeding the world, and also in engaging with the next generation. And specifically, they have a program that you see here on the screen called Hunger U that brings the story of modern agriculture to college campuses, in particular college campuses that are located in urban areas that maybe are more disconnected traditionally from agriculture, and training young ambassadors, students themselves, to educate other young people on university campuses about the important role of agriculture. And then also the other program I'd call out here is the Legacy Project, which we launched with seed funding from, at that point, it was DuPont Pioneer, about 7 years ago. And that program was designed around the notion that there were so many farm families, less than a third of farm families around the United States had any form of documented succession planning or legacy plan in place. They hadn't had those difficult conversations with their families about how to transition the farm from one generation to the next. They didn't have the proper legal paperwork in place, the proper tax documentation, and so on. And so we designed a series of content through our magazine, TV, and radio programs. We created a series of in-person events held around the country. We designed educational workbooks, all of that programming designed to activate farm families to take the next step in making sure they have a strong plan in place to transition those operations successfully to the next generation. And so that's a program that we're continuing on our own now, but it's something that has had lasting impact as we've profiled farm families and raised awareness of legacy planning among farm families broadly, from less than a third of families to over 2/3 of farm families being aware of the issue and having taken steps to activate a plan on their own operations today. Mark, next slide, please. I would be remiss if I did not talk about the fact that for many years we have collaborated with Cooperative Extension on a variety of fronts because of our recognition as a company that Extension serves farmers and ranchers in so many ways, in so many places. And so some of the examples you can see here on the screen, I won't bother to read all of these to you, but certainly we've worked with Cooperative Extension as well as commercial partners to provide guidebooks and handbooks, one of which you can see here on the screen, to really equip people around the country to serve farmers, ranchers, and growers in their conservation stewardship, in their ability to grow specific crops. Obviously, Farm Journal, as we'll see in a moment, serves all types of commodities from row crops to fruits and vegetables to livestock, beef, dairy, pork, and so on. We also have worked alongside Cooperative Extension, nonprofits, and commercial partners in the Farm Journal Test Plots program, which is a series of independent test plots on thousands of acres across the United States that we run in, particularly in the Midwest and the upper Midwest. And then we write stories and we provide programming and do events to really get farmers in the field learning from leaders. And then also I mentioned service on local extension councils, presenting information on agriculture here in the United States and abroad at extension events. And so we're very appreciative of those opportunities, and also appreciative to Cooperative Extension for providing the experts, the research, the information that really makes all of the content and the programming that we do come to life and be relevant and current for our audience. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of how Farm Journal interacts with the farm base today. You can see that we have everything from magazines. Some of the brands you may be familiar with would be brands like Farm Journal, which primarily serves the row crop and the cow-calf dairy audience. Drovers, which serves the ranching audience. The Packer, which serves growers, packers, shippers, and others in the produce industry. And you can also see other brands that really cut across commodity types, including AgriTalk Radio, US Farm Report, which airs on RFD TV on Saturdays and over the weekend, and then Ag Day, which is our daily news magazine that airs Monday through Friday. You can see that we also have a variety of digital properties, thousands of newsletters every year, multiple websites, and then also live events, including some that extension leaders have participated in the past, Corn College, Soybean College, Top Producer Seminar, which is now referred to as Top Producer Summit, which is really a business-focused event for leaders on farm operations. And so we reach across agriculture in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. One of the core pillars of the work that we do is a database, the largest database that we're aware of in agriculture today. We start with a FOIA request to FSA, so we begin with that core foundation of USDA data on farms and ranches, non-operating landowners, and other stakeholders across agriculture. And then we append onto that a variety of proprietary data that we gather from a number of sources. We begin with around 300,000 phone calls every year to farmers and ranchers. And most of the farmers who get one of our publications do so not because they're paying a subscription fee, but because they qualify based on the acreage they're growing or around the types of crops or livestock they raise. And then in addition to that, we ask questions about who is your preferred ag retailer? Are you an adopter of early technology? And we use that to build profiles of farmers that allow us to serve them with the best information, the most relevant information to their businesses possible. We also gather information on the stories they view on agweb.com, which is our umbrella website. And we can tie that back to individual farm records to understand in specific states, in specific regions, which topics are resonating, which kinds of content are they engaging with. And that informs both our editorial strategy, but it also informs our ability to support partners, both commercial and nonprofit, reaching those individuals with technology, with products, with services, with informational resources that would be relevant to supporting their farm businesses day to day. Next slide, please. So this is where Trust in Food comes in. Trust in Food is a division within Farm Journal. We officially started Trust in Food back in January of 2018. And it really stemmed from this data that you see at the top of this slide. And this won't be a shock or a surprise to any of you because of the work that you do each day within Cooperative Extension. But today in the United States, the vast majority of the public, general consumers, have no connection to agriculture. The vast majority of millennials want transparency. They want to understand where their food comes from, understand how it was grown and raised, make sure that those who produced it and transported it and so on did so with our natural resources top of mind, as well as things like animal welfare, worker treatment. All of those kinds of factors are so important and so relevant to their purchasing and the way they view the food system. And of course, consumers self-report that they're also more willing to pay for sustainable products. And so the state that we see in agriculture today at Farm Journal, as we do research and as we talk with our partners in agribusiness, in the nonprofit world, at universities, both land grant and otherwise, there's a recognition that growing and sustaining public trust is so important to helping farmers and ranchers maintain their license to operate. It's critical to helping our land grant institutions be able to pursue innovative research to help our commercial partners and university partners pursue new technology, new products that will help us reduce our environmental footprint, feed more people, and also do so in a way that is sensitive to the needs of the marketplace. And so we believe at Farm Journal that the things that we bring to the table are, number one, that trusted platform to be able to communicate with farmers and ranchers, oftentimes about topics that may be uncomfortable or difficult or challenging. And conservation and sustainability presents many, many opportunities, as everyone on the phone, I think, is aware. But perhaps one of the challenges that we have is that the average farmer believes themselves to be a really tremendous steward, but some of the scientific data that we have about the environmental impact of agriculture presents real challenges that our industry must address, from hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico to legacy phosphorus in fields. Even as farmers draw down their footprint of the inputs that they use, they improve water efficiency and so on. Nonetheless, there are real systemic challenges as well. And so Trust in Food was really designed to, number one, begin at the farm field, helping farmers understand the changes that are happening in the food system and positioning them for success by pairing them with the resources of nonprofits, of the commercial sector, of land grant institutions, Cooperative Extension, and others, and building programs and products and services that help them navigate that roadmap and take action, leading to adoption and maintenance of conservation practices and systems in the field. In turn, Trust in Food sees this as an opportunity to begin building bridges from the farm base and from the larger agricultural and food value chain to consumers. And so I'll give you some examples of how we've started to build that bridge as we think about ways that we might be able to support Cooperative Extension in this journey as well. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a really clear example of how we've started to build the bridge between agriculture and the general public. And this is the Agriculture Through the Voice of the Farmer installation that's actively in place on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The Voice of the Farmer program was co-created by Trust in Food, the Farm Journal Foundation, and AMS at USDA. And our partners, we are putting this under the umbrella of a new program called America's Conservation Ag Movement, which is really designed to provide that national platform for talking to the farm base about conservation agriculture, resource stewardship, and really equipping them to understand how they can make these broad national topics relevant to their specific individual farm operations. And the Voice of the Farmer Garden on the National Mall helps the general public understand that journey that farmers are taking, and that others who are helping farmers, like Cooperative Extension, like NGOs, like agribusinesses, are doing to make a contribution to that work. Roughly 24 million visitors come to the National Mall every year. The National Mall exhibit is situated so that there are actual crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, vegetable and fruit crops, and others planted, as well as a mobile tour that visitors can take on their smartphones, videos that are recorded with actual farmers and ranchers in commercial agriculture across the United States, not only crops, but also livestock, talking about the contributions and the work they're doing to advance their own resource stewardship. And this exhibit will be in place through October of next year, and we hope that it will be extended beyond that. On Fridays, when the farmers market takes place in Washington, D.C., we're going to actually have real farmers and other essentially ambassadors, tour guides, giving guided tours to visitors, to the general public, policymakers, and others who happen to be there, and guiding them through this exhibit. And so this is one example, a very tangible example of some of the ways we think we can contribute to all of the great work that's happening in our industry around sustainability and conservation by making serving in a convening role by bringing together these educational resources and allowing it to have a real public position in front of the general public. Next slide, please. So now I want to just give you some broad examples, some broad opportunities that we think could exist as we examine the role that cooperative extension plays at the national, regional, and local level. And I want to be very upfront and clear that while we have not engaged directly with land grants at this point, the reason that we've initiated these conversations starting back in March is that we really think, from our own personal experience, from our experience as an organization at Farm Journal, and from visiting with extension leaders in specific places, that there is a great opportunity to support the work of extension through the platform of Trust in Food. And I'll talk about some of those specific areas in research, in outreach and engagement, and in other areas that we'll address through the course of the rest of this presentation. The first opportunity that we see is the opportunity to expand capacity for land grant research and cooperative extension. And so one example of this is a project that we're currently working on with funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and a non-land grant institution. And we're working not only with the University of Montana, which is our research partner, but also with Stroud Water Research Center. The purpose of this project was a recognition that there are, as many of you are aware, significant regulations and rules in place in the Chesapeake Bay. Those rules differ depending on whether you're operating in Virginia or Pennsylvania or Maryland. And the resource challenges vary. In some cases, erosion is a major concern. In other areas, fertilizer and nutrient runoff is a challenge. In other areas, there's particularly high concentrations of livestock production. And so we came together with our research partners with support from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We recognized there was a funding opportunity in the Chesapeake Bay. And so what we did was to schedule a series of meetings where we talked about our respective capabilities. The University of Montana has invested heavily in artificial intelligence and geospatial technology. Farm Journal has experience in farmer-specific data as well as in strategic communication and research. And Stroud Water Research Center has really been a leader in tools and resources that research water issues, in particular along the East Coast. And so we worked together to develop a written proposal. We navigated that process in partnership in conversations with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, submitted our proposal for a competitive review, and ended up securing those resources. And over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, the value of that program is roughly $1 million. And Trust in Food is a sub-award providing specific services like research, like strategic communication, and so on, to be able to actually deploy that program in the field, measure results, and use that to activate change on the landscape, up to and including actually identifying specific farmers that are interested in taking technical assistance or financial incentives or other resources from local on-the-ground partners to adopt or maintain or accelerate their own conservation practices. Next slide, please. I would also mention before I move to this slide that one of the benefits of working in that kind of a collaboration is that funding is available not only for Trust in Food, but in particular for our university research partner and other research partners to do the things that they do best. And so unlocking that new revenue is really important to be able to add value and to contribute where each of us has specific strengths. The next example is in this area of heightening grant application competitiveness. And this is something that we've heard anecdotally from funding partners, that one of the benefits they see in working with Trust in Food is the ability to add new capabilities that they wouldn't otherwise have, or perhaps enhancing capabilities that they've already proven to be leaders in. And so the example that I've shared here is that while we have not at Trust in Food worked directly with Purdue University, the Nature Conservancy approached us and asked us to develop a program that would build on research that was conducted by TNC and Purdue and published in the journal Land Use Policy. And the original research study really focused on calling out specific areas, I think roughly 5 key areas that need to be addressed in order for farmers and non-operating landowners to work more collaboratively around the adoption of conservation practices on farm fields that are operated by a farmer but owned by another landowner. And so we designed a program with TNC that would complement the work of Purdue and TNC, add new insights. And so we worked with the TNC, and this is actively happening in 2019, to use the Farm Journal database to identify and hone in on farmers and landowners in areas within the I-states where there are specific resource challenges. And so we then did a series of focus groups and research studies building on the work of Purdue and TNC. We then culminated that in a report that had specific strategies around designing a communications campaign, both to tenant farmers and to landowners, to encourage them to begin those conversations. And we foresee that there are probably opportunities in other regions to do something similar to this, as well as to actually go from awareness and education building into activation, to guiding farmers to university resources or NGO resources or specific programs that might be available to activate conservation on the landscape. Next slide, please. One of the other key opportunities that we see is the opportunity to work with Extension in specific regions and states and bring into our research and engagement efforts partners that Extension might not normally collaborate with, or that might have a desire to collaborate with, but perhaps hasn't had the resources to do so in the past. One really strong example that we're extremely excited about at Trust in Food is a new partnership that we're developing with American Public Media. Many of you are probably very well aware that APM and its stations and its communications resources often are housed within land-grant universities. APM has tremendous reach, I think something like 60 million listeners per month around the United States. They're very respected in the work that they do in engaging with curious people in the general public around really important issues. And they've launched a series of 3 impact initiatives, one of which is the water main. And the water main focuses in part on the intersection of water and agriculture. And so they are going to be announcing later this fall some groundbreaking research they've done of the general public and its perceptions of US water issues. So they're going to ask everything from when was the last time you were unable to pay your water bill, to which are the industries most responsible for polluting our waterways, to all kinds of different issues that are aimed at understanding how the public engages with water from a recreational standpoint, from the use in their homes, and in the food that they eat. And then we're going to be working with them this fall, and we are actively surveying farmers to ask them the same questions. And then in January, we have an event called the Trust in Food Symposium, and we're going to be collaborating with APM to introduce to the public and to stakeholders in agriculture, ideally also a Cooperative Extension, what farmers told us about their perceptions, and comparing farmers and the general public, and using those findings to, again, build programming and content that strengthens linkages, that creates greater understanding and greater public will for clean, affordable water, both in the general public and also in the farm base. Next slide, please. Another key opportunity, we believe, is to be able to experiment and create pilot projects for Cooperative Extension as appropriate to test the communications, the data, and the research capabilities of Farm Journal and Trust in Food in delivering your existing programming and outreach in specific counties and regions and states. Oftentimes, the organizations, the nonprofits and agencies that we work with today come to us because they want to understand better how data and research and so on can help them reach the right farmers in the right places, or the right ag retailers, or the right landowners. And we're learning more every day what those capabilities look like, how to improve them, and new applications for them. And so we think that because of the strategic placement that Extension has between both its responsibility to agriculture, but also to the general public, that there could be really incredible opportunities to build educational programming, to build content, to develop research that really advances the work of cooperative extensions strategically, while also being very sensitive to resource constraints and limitations, and helping to make the most of every dollar that you spend or every hour that you invest in doing that research and outreach. Next slide, please. One of the other opportunities that we see is the ability to help cooperative extension at the local level understand your constituents in agriculture specifically. And again, I mentioned we gather data and manage data around farmers, non-operating landowners, ag retailers, and increasingly we're also working with other stakeholders in the supply chain that could allow us to build research or use the existing data set to enhance delivery of services and programming for extension. One example is that we are working currently on a project with Environmental Defense Fund around celebrating the work that ag retailers do in conservation agriculture to help connect the dots for farmers to resources that exist to understand the science of conservation, to understand the financial incentives and technical assistance that exist, and to accelerate and measure adoption and conservation systems on the landscape. And so we started with a data analysis of the retailers that we know around the United States. We identified people in all of the 9 USDA growing regions, and then we used that to do research, custom interviews, an email-based research study, and then eventually a research report that we're developing currently that will examine the question of what are innovative retailers doing and how can the industry learn from them and be adopting some of those best practices. And so the same data set could be used to advance specific research and outreach opportunities at Cooperative Extension. Next slide, please. This is an example of an in-kind collaboration opportunity in which we've partnered with Field to Market, which is a multi-stakeholder organization serving the row crop sector that works with land-grant institutions, NGOs, the government, and others to develop consensus around sustainability metrics for row crops in particular. And so we went out and we used the research capabilities and data of Farm Journal to interview farmers across a broad array of commodities and learn from them about when was the last time you saw a sustainability goal from a food company? How soon do you think consumer interest in food is going to impact your operation? And we really found that the majority of farmers hadn't seen a sustainability goal from a food company, but they strongly believe that consumer demand for sustainable food is going to impact them at the farm gate. There's some differences in how soon they think it's going to happen. But again, that's a report that I'm happy to share that would, again, articulate an in-kind example where we pooled resources, time and capital and data to really advance our industry's understanding of the intersection between consumers and the agriculture system. Next slide, please. In summary, there are, we believe, some key opportunities to collaborate with cooperative extension and land-grant institutions. I want to again reiterate that while we haven't done that directly to date, we're very excited about the potential because we recognize the value that cooperative extension provides to communities across our country. We recognize the leadership position that cooperative extension has in research, in outreach, both to the farm base, but also to the general public, and about the unique convening role that cooperative extension can play. And so our role at Trust in Food is not to reinvent the wheel or to be duplicating resources that exist, but rather to make sure that we can provide a conduit, a mechanism for helping those convening efforts, for connecting the right stakeholders to the right information and resources, to developing new research and programs that really advance our industry's efforts to be the best stewards that we can be and communicate those stories to the public, and make sure that the resources that you are investing in your local communities and in your regions go to the right stakeholders that do the most good and that are able to be measured, to make sure that you can take that back to your universities, to your cooperative extension systems, to policymakers and others who have a direct vested interest in the work of Cooperative Extension to make sure that Cooperative Extension's strength and relevance remains as strong or stronger than it's ever been. And so with that, I'm going to be quiet, and I'd love to turn the presentation back over to Rick for some Q&A. And Mark, if you wouldn't mind advancing a couple of slides to that contact page, that'll make sure that anyone who has questions that we don't address here or wants to talk further has my contact information. Thank you again so much for the opportunity. And with that, I'll hand it back to Rick.
All right, Nate, this is Ed.
Thanks.
I was able to get on, and thank you very much for that. And at this time, we will open it up for questions and comments. I did see a question in the chat box, Nate, that asked if you'd had any relationship with E-Extension, and I'm not sure if you know what that is, but that's been a platform that we have used nationally in communication about a variety of things, and also is one that now is heavily invested in collaboration. So I don't know if you've had any history there or not.
Excellent. No, to be totally candid, we have not, but we would be very interested in learning more about E-Extension and exploring opportunities there. That's exciting.
All right, folks, are there questions out there?
I see a question here, Ed, that asks, can components of the voice of the farmer be adapted for use at farmers markets within states? So that's a great question. We've actually had quite a bit of interest at the state level at opportunities to take the garden model and bring it other places. So if someone out there has a specific example or an opportunity, we would be very interested in having Trust in Food and probably our partners at the Farm Journal Foundation explore what that could look like. I think that's a really compelling example of an opportunity to actually take that programming about agriculture and put it in a place where the public has direct access. That would be something we would be very interested in discussing further.
Excellent.
Nate, this is Chuck Ross from Vermont. I have two questions for you. One, I appreciated the presentation and didn't know if you were going to share the slides, just as a reminder of some of the work you all are involved in. And two, are you working with any farm to school programs to address the broad issue of agricultural literacy?
Thank you very much, Chuck. I would be happy to share the slides, and I'll work with Ed to make sure that you get access to those. In terms of farm to school ag literacy, that is an area that we are not involved in currently. But again, you know, as I mentioned before, Farm Journal historically has been a business-to-business company, an agricultural-facing company, but we do believe strongly that our role is going to be changing, and probably fairly quickly, starting with this voice of the farmer as an example, that we really do have to start building new products and services and resources that really bridge that divide and start reaching consumers all the way down to the youngest people. My wife and I have 4 children ranging in age from 1 to 8. And so, you know, recognizing that they have, you know, recognizing needs to be reached, while we're not doing that currently, would welcome the chance to explore what that could look like and how we might be able to support farm to school efforts.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions.
Other questions? Don't be shy. Are there any more in the chat box? I've not seen any.
Nate, this is Rick. It seems to me that our opportunities are at various levels. And it seems to me being able to raise awareness of extension for partnering opportunities with the Trust and Food Project at various levels seems to be most productive. I'm not sure about a national engagement, other than to facilitate that local relationships. What are your thoughts as you thought about this as well?
I think, Rick, thank you for the comments and the observations there. I think you're spot on that really the opportunity we see is that because in the past, legacy planning is something that stretches across everyone. It's complex, but it also is widely applicable to a very broad audience. The same is true for conservation, consumer bridging and so forth, but it's also extremely regional and extremely state specific. And frankly, it's even county specific, as you all know, depending on what you're growing or raising, whether you're near an urban center or out in rural America. And so I think that you're exactly right, that there are a whole host of opportunities, and probably the best place to start is just to sort of think, if you're an extension leader in a specific region or over a specific state, I think that's exactly right. As you think through your own programming, your own strategic priorities, thinking about how these tools could apply to your specific programs in your specific area probably makes the most sense. I don't think, as you said, that a national engagement necessarily makes sense at this point. But certainly, as you see those needs perhaps changing or evolving, we're welcome that conversation. But certainly, we're looking to build relationships across the country. And I think that model of working locally in specific areas has worked successfully so far. And so I think the model you're describing makes good sense.
Nate, we got a question in the chat box from Linda Pfeiffer at Purdue, and she's wondering about the scope of the audience analysis data.
Sure, thank you for the question, Linda. I'll try to answer it, and then if I don't answer it as in-depth as you would like, please follow up with specific other questions. I would say that the audience analysis really spanned all three of the I states. What we did in that example with the Nature Conservancy is that we took all of the farmer and non-operating landowner data we had for the entire states of Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana. And so with each field of data, so each individual farmer, each landowner, we can have up to 1,000 data attributes. And now, to be completely transparent, we don't have that many attributes on each and every individual. Data, as you all know, is constantly evolving and growing, and we're constantly getting better at how do we supplement that database and make it stronger. But basically, we started with those federal data that we know about each and every one of those farmers and landowners. We add on to that the questions that we asked through our call center, the questions about being an early adopter. Do you prefer red or green equipment? What brands do you use, et cetera? And then we were able to look across all three of those states, and then with the Nature Conservancy to say, okay, within this state, let's focus first of all on these specific counties in this area. And they did that because they recognized that, in this particular part of Iowa, the soils are really black, and we know that, soil health is a really primary concern, whereas in Illinois, some of the landowners may be based in urban Chicago, and so the conversation between an urban landowner and a rural landowner may be quite a bit different. And so we tried to segment out the audience based on specific criteria that TNC identified. And so I would say that, then we were able to back out. So if we weren't able to find a big enough pool of people to choose from to do the phone interviews or the research, we were then able to sort of back out and say, okay, let's add a few additional counties to make sure that we have the best, most representative pool of people possible. And so from there, we were able to identify specific people for the qualitative portion of the study. You can also have the ability to take all of those data points, put them on a map, so you can actually see where they're located. You can click on a dot and learn a lot about specific operators in specific areas. So those are some of the examples of areas that we have explored to really dig into that data. I think increasingly we're moving to geospatial data as well. I don't know if that helps answer your question or not, but would be happy to take follow-ups.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you have a pretty broad 1,000 data attributes, not across the board, but pretty impressive. And so, and I guess it's hard for us to generalize with the quick examples you gave, but I'm trying to get the scope of what you're offering here. So it sounds like this has been kind of a way to identify, how to work with the early adopters, and then maybe do some social norms campaigns to, broaden out, for example, conservation practices. And do you collect data on what the farmers are wanting from the scientists and from the industry? Is that part of your focus?
So thank you for the question, Linda. And I think you're exactly right that we do all of those things. We do the, working with early adopters, social norms campaigns, data on farmer needs. I would say that one thing that we've explored a little bit, but not as intentionally as you're describing, is, for specific NGO partners like the Walton Family Foundation, for example, we did have some questions that we asked farmers in a specific area of central Illinois about the kinds of resources that are done for information about conservation or agronomic practices. I think the study that you're describing would be extremely valuable, and it's something we'd be very interested in doing, because part of our goal, we believe, is to actually engage in some of this new research that hasn't been done before around what are the pinch points or flexing areas that could actually accelerate farmer understanding of conservation, adoption of practices, and then maintenance of those practices after they've been put on the ground. Because that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that lots of times farmers may take an incentive, but then because of circumstances changing and their other responsibilities, they don't necessarily stick with it. And so we think that we can play a role in doing that research, understanding what farmers' views and attitudes are, whether it's toward scientists and land grants or NGOs or whatever it might be, and really help build that rapport, design communications around it, and then actually help strengthen those relationships to the point that work actually gets done out on farms and ranches and so on. So we haven't done that specific study, Linda, but we'd be very interested in pursuing something like that.
Yeah, and that's, as you know, part of our mission as a land grant is to be responsive to, what the farmers want, what the public wants, and how to blend that with conservation practices and moving forward with profitability and all those sorts of challenging issues. Do you have a report that we could kind of see a little bit more in depth? What you guys have done, again, in terms of some of these projects?
Sure, I would be happy to share some information. I'll give you, I think I mentioned that field to market report, so I'll make sure that Ed has a copy of that. I can also share some more details on some of those specific projects you've mentioned. Of course, some of the projects that we're working on with NGOs and specifically are still underway. And so we would need to get their permission to share some of that information, but broadly, I'm happy to share that. And then as soon as I can have permission to share more detailed information, I'll be glad to pass that along as well. But I think I can get a good package that would give you some perspective for the kinds of things we've been working on.
Yeah, it seems like you have, our extension agents in the field do needs assessments and collect data, but you're also doing electronic data collection, which could augment that potentially, it sounds like.
Yes, that's right. We do everything from email-based research to physical mailers to phone calling, and actually we have a call center that we work with to actually survey farmers over the phone. So certainly any opportunity to supplement or support and drive that participation in some of that research that you do, we can certainly, we'll be happy to help you on something like that. And
then do you have some breakdown of like fee structure? You partner on grants. Is there, what is your fee structure for extension? Those types of things.
Absolutely. I would be happy to have a follow-up conversation. I would say broadly that it really just depends on the project. A lot of the organizations that we work with like to start small and do a pilot and see what works. We can work with pretty much any budget. I wouldn't say there's like a threshold per se, but I would certainly say that with our NGO and land grant and other partners, we would certainly apply appropriate discounts to make sure that it's affordable and that it actually helps you do your work better rather than being, a large commercial play or something like that. We'd like to make sure that whatever pricing structure we provide is very customized to the type of work you want to do. And then we can walk with you and explain how we arrived at those prices and make sure that it's a good fit and customize the program up or down to fit your needs, both on the pricing and also on the deliverables that we would be providing to you.
And we could custom write the survey questions, I assume.
Absolutely. We co-create survey questions all the time. We really do lean heavily on our partners to sort of guide us and give us some direction. Have expertise in-house in terms of writing surveys and designing them, but it really is a collaborative process where we really work together to make sure that all the things that you want to know are addressed, and that we make sure we have the best chance of actually getting strong responsiveness to that survey.
Okay. Thank you. Should I type in my email here?
That would be great.
Yeah, I'll send you an email at the contact point that you sent us. That would be helpful, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda.
Nate, related to that is the question about, just following up, actually, is if folks want to explore an opportunity in partnership with you, what steps do they need to take? What kind of pre-work preparation should they do before you have the conversation? Any advice there?
Absolutely. Well, Mark, thank you, Ed. Mark, could you go to the next slide, please? The best way to start would honestly be just to shoot me an email or to give me a phone call, and you can see my contact information here. You can find some more of the broader information that I shared today on our website, which is also listed. So, Ed, I think it really depends on the organization.
Sure.
I would say that you don't honestly need to do a lot of pre-work. One of the best ways we found to just begin exploring what an opportunity might look like is just schedule a phone call and to say, all of you kind of know what we're doing right now, but we would love the opportunity to learn what's happening at the regional and local level among extension directors. And just to say, to learn from you more about your needs and what are your priorities for the year ahead? Where are you really having some good wins that you'd like to accelerate and make even bigger? Where are you struggling that you'd like to get some help with? Whether Trust in Food can provide that or not, we'll be very upfront with you. And I think that first conversation, you don't need to do a whole lot of background research other than just coming into the conversation with an open mind and saying, helping us better understand what you're working on. And then what typically happens is that the Trust in Food team will go back and we'll spend a few weeks building off of what you've told us and sharing some examples of other similar programs that we've built or outreach that we've done for other partners. And then we can come back and actually have a workshop, either virtually or in person. We can come to you and actually maybe bring a larger Trust in Food team and bring more members of your team into the conversation and share ideas and get your thoughts on, does this make sense? Is it a good fit? And from there, then we would actually build a proposal, whether it's an application for a joint grant opportunity, whether it's something that you're directly investing in, either financially or in kind, and actually give you a proposal to then fine tune. So it's really, I would say, a series of multiple conversations. We want to make it as not unburdensome as possible. And we know you all are extremely busy and doing a lot of really good work. And so whatever fits your schedules, I think that first introductory conversation doesn't need to be a big lift at all. It's really just about taking maybe an hour to learn more about each other and then allowing us the time to bring you back some ideas that would really be catered to the work that you're doing in your specific area. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. Yes.
You bet.
Are there other questions? Speak up. Now's the chance. Well, as I thank you, we'll give folks one more chance to think of a question if they have it, but I want to thank you, Nate, for being with us today and being a part of our Learning for Leaders series. This is going to be the last one. Anybody got a question? All right. Hearing none, we will close out and thank all the participants. I look forward to seeing many of you in a couple of weeks in Nashville. And Nate, we look forward to building some partnerships with Trust in Food. So thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure, Ed. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. And thank you all for being here and for the great questions. I really enjoyed being with you and look forward to hearing from some of you in the days ahead.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. And with that, we will conclude our this day's Learning for Leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.